Hi, this is Joanne Hillhouse in Antigua. And yes, I am wearing a carnival headdress. Why? I need a reason to wear a carnival headdress? I don't think so. I mean, I could come up with one. Like, I'm wearing this red shirt that I wore in another video, and I wanted to shake things up a bit, be a little bit more festive. Welcome to my Authortube Newbie Tag. First question, how did I find out about the tag? I found out about it through booktuber and author, Caribbean author Giselle Mills, who I found when she did a review of a pre-review, a tag on one of my books, and then a review subsequent, a positive review. Thank you, Giselle, on my book, Musical Youth. What genres do I write in? I write and have published primarily fiction, but also poetry and nonfiction. I also experiment with playwriting and have written for television and radio as well. In fiction, I've written, published novels, novellas, and short stories. As for subgenres, I've written coming-of-age stories, romances, broadly contemporary fiction with aspects of political and family, domestic drama, and romance intertwined. I've written young adult fiction and children's fiction, which have been largely fantasy with aspects of realism. I actually have a draft of a play of one of my picture books, so I'm always trying a thing. Currently, I'm working on a short story collection which has different types of fiction. I like experimenting, and as such, I'm particularly drawn to the challenge of speculative fiction at the moment. But in general, I like stories that tap into the human experience. Writing is one of the ways I process life, so in writing, I suppose I'm looking mostly at the things I'm trying to make sense of, what troubles and moves us, what troubles and moves me. So my favorite genre is stories of us. My us being specifically Caribbean, Black, woman, gal from Artes Antigua. Okay, so what is my preferred writing tense and point of view? I tend to default, I think, to the simple past and the close third, where the narrative voice is just over the shoulder of a main character, but it depends on the story. I did one story once, actually posted to my blog, Joe Hadley, where the challenge I set myself was that third voice, but bouncing around like that demon in Fallen from person to person. The second voice is particularly challenging, but particularly good when done well, as in Ezeko Simbagale's All Over Again, which is the book that won the inaugural Burt Award in 2004. That's the book. That's the year that my book placed second for the prize. First person point of view can be really intimate and effective as well, just as the present tense can have a real sense of immediacy. So it really depends on what the work calls for. Um, but I guess for me, the challenge is to stay open to what the story needs, and that is my preferred tense in that moment, and also to challenge myself and do things that I haven't done before. Am I more of a plotter or a pantser? I think I'm more of a pantser, but it's not the Wild Wild West. You know what I mean? So like for instance, in the case of Oh God, I had a sense of where the story was going, but I had to write towards it. I couldn't write it until I got there and saw like what led the story there. Um, but I do take notes, character notes, plot notes, story notes as I go along. And then of course I do a lot of revision on the back end and editing. And once I have a draft down, I can see what the story is trying to be, and kind of get a sense of what to pull out, what to put in, and that sort of thing. So it's more pantsing than plotting, but it's not without some sort of order to it. Am I self-published, published, or yet to be published? And yes, to all three. I have self-published a small poetry collection called Unbecoming. Um, all my books of fiction, my children's picture books, and my teen young adult books, and my adult novels are published with traditional publishers. And of course, I'm always writing and always shopping and pitching stories and or story ideas, so I'm always looking to be published. So it's kind of all three. Head, I think my head got bigger. Hmm. Okay, do I have a dream house or a dream agent? Not really. I've been fortunate to work with small and big publishers and an agent, and I can honestly say that what matters to me more than the name brand is the relationship, that they're reputable and that they will work just as hard for me as I'm prepared to work for myself. And communication. Communication is very important. So those things matter more to me than the name brand or the name of the publisher or agent. When did you start writing? I think I've always been making up stories in my head and adding lyrics to melodies and all that sort of thing. But I think a solid starting point for me was after my grandmother died, Tanti. There was a book that I found with her script in it, and I just continued writing in that book, and that was my first story. What was the first story? That first story was a plantation era story of a very unlikely friendship between two girls. What authors have inspired your writing the most? I think I have to go way back to the oral tradition growing up in the Caribbean. The parables that my mother and other adults would use to pass on lessons, the Jumbi stories that everybody told, the Anansi stories that were just all around in the air, in the calypsos as well. The calypsos, for me, one of my master teachers would have been Shelley Tobit, who wrote a lot of the calypsos of my era, when I was coming of age in the late 70s, early 80s, Short Shirt, Latumba, and other favorites of mine. King Obstinate was another strong storyteller who worked humor and our real lives into his songs. In terms of books, too numerous to mention, Alex Haley to Brenda Scott Wilkinson, Cervantes, Louisa May Alcott, Harper Lee, E.B. White, Stephanie Talon, Judy Blume, and then later Alice Walker, Shakespeare, Terry McMillan, Toni Morrison, Anne Rice, Maeve Binchy, Stephen King, Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes. I mean, where do I... Just as you go along, you keep discovering writers. Jamaica Kincaid was a big one for me because as a writer from Antigua, she kind of opened a door in terms of what was possible for me to be and do. Edwidge Dandicat is a hero in my head. So if I had to narrow it down to three, I think I would say Jamaica, Zora, and Edwidge. That would probably be my top three. It's both. I always have a notebook with me wherever I go because you never know when inspiration will strike. But I do try to schedule writing time. Even if I don't get to write on that day, I try to put it in the schedule to remind myself that this is just as important as that deadline or the other deadline. So I always try to make space for writing however I can. Where do I write? Any and anywhere. On buses, in parks, one time front of stage at the St. Lucia Jazz Festival. Because, like I said, any and anywhere where the inspiration strikes. I did not grow up in silence. I grew up in Artes Antigua in a household which had very little space and very little room for privacy. So you kind of had to learn to process your thoughts in the chaos and noise of the world around you. And then being in a newsroom, having worked as a journalist for many years, same thing. So silence is actually distracting for me. I actually work better with this music or some kind of ambient noise that can, I guess it becomes white noise, but it helps me to focus and write. Hmm. What am I most looking forward to now that I'm part of Authortube? Well, I've been on YouTube for a while, and what I've been sharing is stuff about my writing experiences, if I do readings and that sort of thing. And more recently, I've been sharing some of the reviews that I do of books because I have a blog on book series on my Joe Hadley blog, and now I've kind of leveled up to the book chat on unscripted on author on YouTube. So I guess that'll be part of my author too. But I'm also just open. I'm looking forward to networking, of course, and I'm a book nerd, so always following other readers to see what they're reading and what they like about them. Um, so I'm open. What Authortube videos can we expect to find on your channel? Um, I talk about books a lot, books that I'm reading, books that I'm reviewing. So I suspect that I'll see more of that. I also try to share the writing life, the writing experience, and just anything that strikes my fancy. Shout out to Giselle Mills for bringing me here, whether she knows it or not, to Authortube. You can find me on pretty much all of the social media. I'm Joe Hadley everywhere. That's JHOHADLI on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Pinterest, on everywhere. Joe Hadley. I'm Antiguan Writer actually here on YouTube, but everywhere else I am Joe Hadley. And I look forward to connecting and sharing my books, my stories as a gal from Antigua.